The Atlanta Falcons once again are heading into the free agency without a playoff berth, even though they got this much closer this time, and luckily we're not picking 8th overall once again in this upcoming draft. My name's Tyler, here with my brother Ryan, and we will be breaking down our first ever mock free agency for the Atlanta Falcons here in a moment. But before we do that, if you like the content that we put out and you want to see the channel grow, the easiest way to help us out is to hit that subscribe button, tackle that bell to get notified when new videos come out. And while you're at it, leave a like and a comment. Let us know what you think of some of the moves that we've made and talked about, and some other maybe players you'd like to see them cut or add on to the 2025 Falcons roster. That being said, Ryan, let's pull up over the cap here. This is our first
Let's
time
do it.
doing this, and so we would love to hear any feedback on just your guys' overall thoughts on our presentations and our viewpoints as well. But here we're going to start off. These just going to quickly review a lot of the Falcons free agents as of right now, and maybe some of these guys, maybe some of the lower level guys have already been kind of re-signed or have moved on, so to say. But a lot of the key guys that are going to be hitting free agency for the Falcons are going to be Justin Simmons, D. Alford, Mike Hughes, and Matt Judon. Four guys that are on the defensive side of the ball that were saying key contributors is technically, I guess they played a lot of snaps for them. If you're looking at kind of how they contributed, that's maybe a different point of view. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a Falcons fan, and so I'm frustrated with the way our defense have played for a vast majority of the season. But Justin Simmons was a late training camp signing, and I liked it at the time. And there are some good moments as well. But I would be very curious if they re-signed him to like now, and he had a full off season once again, like to work with Jesse Bates after playing with him for a full season in that secondary. What would happen? Guys like D. Alford and Mike Hughes, I think they had their moments, yes, but they are rotational backup cornerbacks as well. And these guys were playing nickel and also like outside CB2, and that's not really an area that I think uh, that we can allow happen again. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the maybe potential cornerbacks that they can go and sign as well. Matt Judon as a Ryan as a former not as a Patriot, as Matt Judon is a former
Yeah.
Patriot. You're a Patriots fan. We'll have an interesting conversation too about Judon, about whether we re-signed him or not. Spoiler alert: we did end up re-signing him, but I still want to have a deeper discussion on that. The other big name too that we need to talk about is going to be Drew Dahlman as well, our center. Um, that's going to be a big void for this team to fill. And with only 4 picks coming into this draft class, I do think that's going to be a guy that we're going to need to go and re-sign, trying to have some continuity. I'm not a big fan overall. I think he's fine. He's improved, yes, but there's definitely better centers out there. But we're kind of hamstrung right now. I think we might have to spend some money this offseason on him to stay there. Bunch of other guys though too on the defensive line as well, like Eddie Goldman as well. Taquan Graham is here also. James Smith Williams, Katavius Street. These guys are going to be interesting on what happens with them overall because we've invested a lot in the defensive line in last year's draft. I'm confident that we're going to do it again as well. So, what are these guys' roles as well? A lot of these guys were drafted. I believe, like even I think Taquan Graham. I don't even think Terry Fontenot drafted him. I think that was still uh, who's the other guy? Gel
Was it?
hair with glasses. Everybody
Oh,
knows what I'm talking about.
it
Um,
wasn't Scott Pioli. It was
I'll look it up here in a second.
yeah.
But yeah, those are some of the main guys. Obviously, there's some other guys down here as well, but we're just less contributing guys. I think a guy like Daryl Hodge, just with his special teams prowess, I bet we re-sign him for exactly what they're maybe 1.3 million. Give him a little bit of a bonus, but some other guys here though, I do think they are rotational guys as well. We can go find plenty of Storm Nortons. We can go find plenty of Antonio Hamiltons or like Elijah Wilkinsons, like these guys that are going to be backup swing tackles or interior guards or rotational safeties as well. So Ryan, want to throw it over to you. Anybody that you think I missed here, kind of talking about the Falcons free agents? Well, I guess it'd be
No,
true if you would scroll down the whole list. Uh,
I think I only had Rondell Moore, not on the bottom there.
that's fair. That's kind of
But
a big name.
well, maybe. I mean, you guys traded Desmond Ritter for him, so I'm not sure like your ties to him are super like strong, but that is somebody that you traded for that you never really got to see play. He does have about 4 million in guarantees left, so if you extend him, maybe you can spread that out over a couple more seasons and maybe actually reap some benefit from spending that money. So I know like you're keen on the Falcons getting a wide receiver in free agency or maybe in the draft, and I think it'll be interesting to kind of see what they do. But let's go ahead and just jump over into the actual free agent portion here, and we'll start with the internal free agents. So we'll start with some of the moves that they made in terms of getting rid of players and clearing up cap space, because I believe they're about 15 million under right now.
About as of right, I'm double
Yeah,
checking right now my side here as well. Looks like actually they're just shy of 12 million over the cap,
yeah,
uh, as well. So that's what we're trying to think about. Like, what are some clear moves? And I know there's some reports that have come out, like Kirk Cousins is going to be cut. Kirk Cousins is definitely going to be the backup here. They'll stomach it for 2025. I think there's no way in hell that Kirk Cousins is on the Falcons team next year, just with that cap space. And I think also too, there are a lot of QB needy teams as well, who's going to be looking for a stopgap kind of guy that has a cap space. Maybe guys
yeah,
like Las Vegas, maybe Tennessee as well. Maybe Cleveland is like, and they're already in their own cap space situation, but maybe we can work something out
yeah,
as well. Both the New York teams, they're looking for something. Maybe the Jets just go from one Achilles tear to another Achilles tear just for the stopgap year and be like, let's just suck it up as we've got a whole new head coach coming in and we're going to be kind of maybe going through a little bit of a rebuild. Something similar, I think the Saints might be going through as well. So either way, it's highly incentivized for the Falcons to trade Kirk Cousins, even if it's just for a seventh round pick. Just getting
yeah,
this fat contract off of our cap space puts us in the black. I'm pretty sure it puts us at like 15 million in cap space, which is going to be kind of our goal to try and get to as well when it comes to after cutting players and re-signing players both internally and externally. Every team we're trying to get to about $15 million left in their cap space so they can re-sign their draft players and maybe some other in-season signings as well for injuries or whatnot.
yeah. And I think like just getting Kirk Cousins off the books is going to be such a big reprieve, not just in this season, but in future seasons. You can see in 2026 they have about 115 million at this point. If they sign or when they sign contracts with current free agents, that number will go down. But I do think like getting that off the books is going to be such a big reprieve for this front office. A couple other moves that we made. We did trade Kyle Pitts. Probably will not recoup a lot. I think probably about a fifth or sixth round pick for Kyle Pitts. It might even be Kyle Pitts and a sixth for a fifth. But at least you guys are moving up there. I know you only have 4 picks, so maybe getting a pick for him would be solid. But I do think getting that 10.8 million off of the cap is going to be enticing for the Falcons as well. I do think of teams like my Patriots, like the Washington Commanders, maybe even like the Cincinnati Bengals, teams that have some. Well, I guess the Bengals are in their own separate cap situation because they have cap space, but over half of it is going to have to go to T. Higgins. So like there are teams that have the cap space to go out and make this trade and the draft capital. And I think the Falcons would be likely to move off of him just because he hasn't been nearly as productive as I think you guys have hoped for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely worth the fourth overall pick investment from 2021. I will say scroll down a little bit more so the viewers can see the cap space that they would save. So it would be about just shy of $11 million total.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and that's I I think it's just a move that you got to make. I also think too as well a tight end that would fit better into this type of system within the Zach Robinson system is going to be a tight end that it's just an overall beefier and it's more versatile. A guy that can line up in line, or down in a tight end position as well, but also could line up in the slot. And I think in this draft, I think there's going to be a couple of guys that you can go and get and put in that position. But also, too, I think some potential free agents that you can go and get for $1 million, $2 million as well. That we'll talk about here momentarily. But in the draft, a guy like Mason Taylor, I think would be a guy that you could potentially go out and get if you want to try and address that position. There's a bunch of other day 3 guys I think that have a lot of good value as well. When it comes to like some of the other like tight ends, I think that they could sign a free agency for a couple $1 million. Maybe bring back Austin Hooper a veteran tight end there. Obviously, we all remember he was a former Falcon. I think maybe get even just some other guys like a CJ Uzoma, Chris Manhertz, or somebody just that they could just be a solid just tight end as well, and just provide some good solid minutes if they'd want to get out from that. To me, it's more about getting rid of the $10 million, $11 million to a player that's not worth that money,
Yeah.
then and we'll worry about like that tight end position a little bit later. So uh, we only made two other cuts. I mean, and we'll talk about them here in a second. But there's going to be plenty of other cuts. Actually, if we scroll down to the bottom, like I bet that they can move on from a lot of these other guys. Keep scrolling, keep scrolling. A lot of these other guys that are league minimum guys that they can go in. Like this is where they'll clear up maybe 8, 9, $10 million just for moving on from these guys, seeing if there's some better options, trying to make some other moves, and go and find some other guys that can be some league minimum guys. One guy here that we did end up cutting, which maybe this is controversial. Want to get your thoughts on the Falcons fans when it comes to cutting Young Hoku. If you cut him with the post June 1st designation, you do save over $4 million in the cap space. And I know he was injured this past year, but even before that too, it just felt like he was much more inconsistent than what he normally was. And maybe he was battling injuries throughout the majority of the year, but his strength was his accuracy, his weakness was his length. So if you got a kicker
Yeah.
that he can barely kick at 58 yards, and I say barely, I mean like that's still an amazing feat to go and do. But in today's day and age in modern NFL, you have guys kicking at 63 yards, no problem. But, a guy like Brandon Aubrey, and he might be the best kicker in the league, to be fair, if I'm making this comparison, but he doesn't want to, like, he's got the same motion no matter what, because if he tries to kick it farther, maybe it'll mess up his technique. And so he's just like 64, 65 is going to be his limit. He absolutely can kick it farther than that if he has to. But you go watch his 64 yarders and they look effortless. Young Hoku from 55 yards is giving it everything he's got. And he was very accurate with that. But I think that I, I think his inconsistency is the reason why I think you got to move on from him, and at least just go and bring in some other competition. Maybe restructure the contract to a more team friendly deal overall, and see like if he can come back and be more consistent. So, very curious on that, Ryan. I know you're a Georgia Southern alum, same as Young Hoku, and so I know that hurts you overall. But so that one might
Eh,
be kind of controversial. I think one that's going to be a big debate overall is what do we do with the defensive line? And we ended up deciding on cutting David Onyemata. And so his cap space would be about 8 million. And I still think Grady Jarrett's just one of the better defensive tackles in the league. I know he's 32, yes, but at the same time though, too, we could save 16 million with cutting him, but I think the value he's going to bring. I also think the value he's going to bring to the young defensive linemen that we're bringing in, especially too, like we drafted Rook, we drafted Brandon Dorlus. Rook had a lot of really good moments in the time that we saw play last year. Brandon Dorlus played a little bit, but hopefully you're continuing to see that upside as well. And I think keeping Grady Jarrett on that defense in this 3-4 solid defense that Raheem Morris wants to be running, I just think he's just too good to cut. I understand why they would do it if they did. But moving on, a guy from like David Onyemata, who is technically older, but also still clears up 8 million in cap space, I think is going to be huge overall for the just the freeing up of the cap space.
Yeah, and I think you look too. I know you guys only have 4 draft picks, but if you trade down from that first, you can accumulate 1 or 2 more, and then you can spend one of those picks on getting a David Onyemata replacement in this super
Yeah.
deep defensive line class. So I think there are a lot of options there for the Falcons. I do think maybe restructuring Grady Jarrett's deal, restructuring maybe Jesse Bates's deal, give him more money up front, or maybe take a little bit of cap space from next year and move it into this year. I think could be a couple options for them to clear up even more cap space. But I do think we got them to, I believe, about 38 million or 39 million, and then we ended up making a couple signings here. So we brought back Drew Dahlman on a 2-year, $12 million deal with a $6 million average annual value. And then we also brought back Matthew Judon on a 1-year, $8 million deal. He didn't have quite the productive season that he had hoped going into being an unrestricted free agent. But I do think with the Falcons sending a 3rd round pick for him, I do feel like there maybe some internal obligation to bring him back for another season. I do think he performed better in the second half of the season than the first half, just like most of that defensive front did. But I think he benefited from a more aggressive pin your ears back style approach from Raheem Morris after that bye week that for the Falcons in 2024.
Yeah. Now, and I can see that as well. You've been making that argument, and I think it's a fair argument, is that they like it is still Matt Judon. I know he's gonna be 33, but once again, you're gonna have this kind of combination of this young defensive line as well. Braylon Trice, he's gonna be coming back, and unfortunately, like, he tore his ACL in like I think the first quarter of the first preseason game, which so super disappointing. But I think it'd be interesting to see him learn from Matt Judon, and we're going to be in a good position to draft a lot of really good defensive linemen here. I think that can learn from him as well. So still having his presence in his overall explosiveness, especially too as our defensive line gets younger as well, I think could be a good benefit as well. And to your point too, we gave up a third round pick for a reason. It's so
Yeah.
yeah. Wait, was this a third round pick? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
this was the 77.
Yep. Oh, yeah, because we traded for him in August. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
uh, we might as well try and keep him on. But that being said, if they didn't re-sign him, I would understand. And this is kind of an overall greater arching kind of point to like who do you re-sign on this defensive line? And if you could just scroll a little bit on the free agents, like you have Matt Judon, Lorenzo Carter, then you're gonna have Contavious Street, as I've already talked about, James Smith Williams as well. Who are some of these guys that we're going to want to go and re-sign? I think a guy like Nate Landman, I really like the way that he hustles. And so I think you can re-sign him for, and let's not do it here, but it would be one of those like league minimum contracts, maybe $2
Yeah.
million just because he's been there for a couple of years now. But Ryan Newsell's a guy, the backup center now. How do you want to re-sign him? Once again, something very small. Eddie Goldman's another one too. I think with everything going on with the defensive line, and so it's like how are they going to manage this, especially too when they still have some limited cap space. We didn't end up doing this, but to your point, as what you said earlier, they could actually restructure some deals, push some of the cap to next year, as it does look like we have a decent bit of space. And so I do think, to your point, though, I think one guy that would be interesting would be if we re-signed Rondell Moore. And the reason why we're going down that route is we re-sign him to like spread out his money and have it be like $3 million hit to the cap here. I think it would be very interesting overall to on how if we re-sign him, that would address that receiver spot. Because you're right, who knows what could be um, like what he could bring to the table. Because I think another sneaky thing as well too that they might go and try and address in free agency is going to be that cornerback spot. Try and get that lockdown corner overall. Because this class isn't that spectacular when it comes to the overall free agency class. Sorry, the draft class overall when it comes to the corners. There are some good ones, but several of them are coming off injuries. So like, what is that going to mean overall for this team? So there's going to be guys like DJ Reed's the guy I would love to get, but his market value, he probably would be sitting at 14 or $15 million. But I think if we were able to get a guy, Byron Murphy's going to be way too expensive, according to that. But there's going to be a guy like maybe Roswell Douglas that we can go out and get that would be kind of in that $10 to $12 million range. I think that would be interesting, or maybe get another veteran cornerback out there as well. I think that would be an interesting way, I think, to help continue to improve this defense and definitely bolster the other side of AJ Terrell. And so I don't even know if they would do this here. Roswell Douglas, it looks like he's going for
I would say like
uh
9. He's
that's what
older.
it looks like. It is about 9.
Okay.
And so, and let me even see here too as well. But it's that's where it's going to be interesting on how they kind of go and navigate, re-sign a couple of the key players that they think that they might need, but then at the same time too, how do they go and add some free agents as well? And I'm sure they will. I'm sure they'll make a splash. But this is where it's been neat, kind of practicing overall, um, kind of how they're going to move on for some of these guys. And so, with that signing of Roswell Douglas, or like let's just say any corner that you would like them to go and get for about $8 to $9 million, that puts us at that $16 million range. And going into
Yeah.
the draft, I think that's about where most teams would want to be, so they can sign their draft class.
Yeah, the other thing too is the Falcons with only 4 picks, like we could go sign somebody else and get to about 10 million in available
That's
cap
fair.
space. just because they don't have nearly as many guys to go sign. So
That's
hold on,
fair.
I got to sneeze. Ah, bless me. But no, and so like I think the Falcons are in an interesting situation here, just kind of as we wrap up. So just to do a brief overview, they trade Kirk Cousins, they trade Kyle Pitts, clear up cap space there. They cut David Onyemata and Younghoe Koo, re-sign Drew Dahlman and Matthew Judon. I guess re-sign Rondale Moore. I guess he would fall in that category as well, and then go out and add a corner two opposite of AJ Terrell. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that like we've tried to do in this series so far, I think, and we did this here with the Falcons, is we go out, I think we add a baseline at each position. So that offensive line, we went out, we added a baseline there. Michael Penix Jr. is going to have a big impact on that offensive play as a whole. You go out while it's Rondale Moore, he's coming off a torn ACL, a big wild card there. You do add somebody in that wide receiver skill position player room. Defensively, bring back Matthew Judon. You get Charvarius Ward on the second level of that defense. Now I feel like the Falcons can really go into the draft. They have the ability to move around if they can get a team to trade with them. They have the ability to go and take the best player available. Like, let's say Tyler Warren is available at 15. That would be a really interesting option, I think, for the Atlanta Falcons to go and get more of an inline tight end. Or if they want to go like Kenneth Grant and get like a David Onyemata replacement that's a lot younger. I think that's a good option as well.
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot of variety that I think the Falcons could go into the 2025 draft with after a free agent class like this.
Yeah, and that's where it's like I would love to be like the Patriots where I have 130 million in cap space and then like 10 or 11 picks, and you can really kind of like get really imaginative. But then this is also extremely interesting though too, because you're like, well, you're kind of handcuffed. How can I try and make this team as good as possible?
Yeah.
And so I think first thing first we got to focus on is like, what are we truly going to do with Kirk Cousins? And to me, that's where like just thinking about it's like we got to trade it. We got to get that cap that contract somehow off of our cap space.
Yeah.
And I think there will be a team that will take it. I mean, Kirk Cousins, he did talk about how he was playing hurt a little bit in that second half of the year. I think there's some teams that need a stopgap quarterback. You mentioned both New York teams. Cleveland, I think, could be one. Maybe Tennessee likes what they see, or maybe they don't, or would want some sort of stopgap quarterback or veteran quarterback if they end up focusing on drafting a rookie quarterback as well. So I guess he just go from backup to one rookie to another backup. And so I think the Raiders could be another interesting one as well. But that's where it's like none of those are guarantees though. So that's what's interesting, seeing how the Falcons are going to manage like this Kirk Cousins contract. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he is actually, maybe we're going to have $100 million as a second stringer quarterback. It's not the worst contract, I would say, for a quarterback that's not producing anything. That's a shout out to the Cleveland Browns. But we're pretty close. We're second, maybe third.
Yeah. At least you guys didn't like fully guarantee his contract.
Yeah. At least he didn't
Yeah.
assault women. So that's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. Yeah. So on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. Let us know down below what you thought of this episode. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And other than that, we'll see you guys next time.